Hello and welcome to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign from scratch, showing you all the details and all the thought processes that go into it so that you can understand all the pieces and parts that go into my method for writing campaigns. I'm RJ Kerr, I'm your host as always, and today we are going to be working on frankly, an idea that we came up last time. Uh, with our sea shanty siren quest, where we created this sort of sentient logbook, and so we're working on creating this sentient item and filling out its powers and what it does and its goals and so on. Um, so before we jump into that, if you are watching the stream for the very first time or you haven't watched some of the previous videos, let me go ahead and give you a quick update on what we've done so that you're all caught up and you won't miss a thing. So, as I said, we are creating a custom campaign with its own unique domain of dread. To do that, we have used we've chosen a story structure, or sorry, excuse me, a story circle structure as kind of the loose organizational pattern that that we're going to use to help guide us through this campaign, so that we've got all the pieces and parts of a nice narrative story. It's loose; it's something to deviate from effectively. So we have a little bit of guide, a little bit of structure to work with. And we've done a lot filling this out so far. We have figured out how our characters enter into this domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the blood moon. We have figured out what kind of personal motivations would draw them in through this portal. We figured out where they land in a shanty town called Darkport that sits on the edge of an inland sea. We've determined that this inland sea is a big part of the domain of dread, and there was once the basin of a thriving metropolis that has now fallen into ruin and flooded. We've also figured out that the dread lord of this domain is a elemental entity that we're calling Ovander. Although we're still figuring out exactly how he plays into the campaign and how he'll interact overall with the characters. In addition to that, we have figured out the very first adventure that the characters embark on, one in which they are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, discover the existence of a long lost artifact. And now, having learned about this artifact, they realize that it is probably their best chance of escape from this domain, and therefore they need to go out in the world and find it. So now we are working on a larger part of the campaign where the characters get proactive. They have the information to start searching and they kind of have a goal. And now it's up to them to start exploring the world looking for clues. And so we're using a node structure style for that that allows us to create nodes, or as I prefer to call them, investigative scenes, which are moments in the adventure, whether they're encounters, mini adventures, full blown adventures. But there are opportunities for the characters to find clues that lead them to other nodes or other investigative scenes. And they can follow whatever set of breadcrumbs they like all the way to the solution, i.e., the location of the artifact. And we've done a fair amount in building some of those out already. We've used a 5 room structure for a dungeon. We have used a 5 scene structure for a heist, and now we're working on what I like to call a complex social encounter. And so it's a social encounter. Uh, it's at its core, it's a social encounter, but it has a few levels to it. So it's not just a straight kind of die roll, solves the problem, move on kind of situation. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you real quick, and we can get the recap on what we've got going on here. Effectively, this is a situation where the characters have to go seek out this siren, who's a predatory creature by nature. She lures beings to her toll and feasts on them. But recently, she's lost her voice and needs the character's help in acquiring a new one. And so, what she does is she makes a contract with these characters that if they acquire her a new voice from a willing source, and she gives them 3 to select from, uh, that she will give them the information that they came there seeking. We started building that out. We kind of skipped over the beginning portion of this, which is something I frequently do when I'm writing adventures. I like to get the sort of the meat of it done, and then we'll come back to the beginning and we'll figure out how it needs to start to make that work. Um, but we started building out the siren in terms of her background and her wants and her needs to make her a more playable character, especially since we have a plan to kind of pull her back into the adventure later on. And so we gave her things like an objective, so things she wants right now, an ambition, things she wants overall. We gave her values, we gave her a secret, and so on to make it really easy to understand her and role play her very deeply as we go through. Then we started working on the NPCs from which the characters might draw this voice, might secure this voice. And again, it has to be consensual. The person has to give up their voice willingly, and therefore the characters are going to have to role play that out. They're going to have to negotiate with these various NPCs to get what they need. And so we did the same sort of thing we did for the siren, except we also gave them a dilemma, something that would be a reason for why they might want to give up their voice and a reason why they might not want to give up their voice. And so we have both sides of the coin there that this NPC can kind of waffle back and forth between, giving them good reasons to help and good reasons not to. We did that for all three NPCs: our bard, our priest, our widow. And then we started working on complications. So we came up with a very simple sort of complication for if they fail, the PCs fail to secure the voice or a voice from an NPC, and that the NPC starts spreading word of this nefarious deal, and that word travels and it reduces the reputation that the characters have in that community and the outlying communities, making it harder for them to get other jobs done, for them to get support from other people. Um, and then we started working on complications for success, because again, we don't want this to just be a couple rolls of the dice for charisma checks, and boom, boom, everybody's done, everybody's happy. So we added in some encounters that would follow this in, i.e., when the characters secure a voice from one of these NPCs, that there are other people in that NPC's life who object to this and take action to oppose it. And so we've got some relatively simple combat encounter for one of them. We've got one that's more of a chase, another one that's more of a negotiation sort of thing with a ghost. And so we added some layers to those and built out appropriate mechanics as necessary. Then we started working on the return. What happens at the end of this, right? The characters either fail or they succeed. And what happens if they fail? We said that we have a contract. One of the characters has to give up their voice. And what happens if they succeed? And we talked about what the siren provides and what other sort of boon they might receive from this. And then we put a little note in there that effectively, because of the contract, it's almost impossible to trick the siren, meaning they've got to do one or the other, fail or succeed. So that idea of a contract brought us back to the beginning, and we started fleshing that out. And we realized last session that we needed to build out a sort of a sentient document here, an entity that the characters could sign away their life on, as it were, and that is a thinking thing of its own. So if the characters try to do something like steal it to get out of the contract, they try to trick the siren or what have you, that there are consequences and there are challenges that come along with that. So we started building out this sentient logbook, this sentient ship's log, and have taken a few steps in building that out. We came up with the idea of it and what it sort of wants in terms of it's pretty much the siren's familiar. It wants to get back to her if it's separated, and makes every attempt to return. We started working on its actual sentience. That we used a couple reference items from D&D Beyond, things that were already sentient items that exist to kind of help us with a format and a guide on that, coming up with its alignment, its intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, that kind of deal, and some of its powers. We spent some time working on some of the personalities that it has, because we figured out that maybe it uses different personalities and tactics based off of the alignment of the creature that it's trying to manipulate. Um, and so we built out some of those for some role playing fun. And then we started talking about the sort of effects it would have on someone who possesses it. And this is where we're going to jump back in tonight. Because you'll see that we have this TK mechanical effect, lure slash psychic damage, question mark. And the idea being we need to come up with the mechanics that are involved in this. We have a cool idea that while in possession of the log, any creature who is not the siren begins to hear a faint but alluring singing on the wind, and that no one else hears this singing. And likewise, the target begins to see ghosts of those who failed to fulfill their contracts with the siren, many of whom appear as drowned sailors. And so, what effect does that have on our NPCs, or on our PCs rather, mechanically? Other than just being a cool little story thing, what might it compel them to do? And that's where we're going to jump into this. So, with that being said, this is an interactive stream. So, as you have thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, concerns, or frankly anything else TTRPG related that you want to talk about, jump into the chat. I'd love to hear from you guys. You come up with some amazing ideas and add a ton of value to this channel. So hopefully we can keep that up. Thanks everybody, and let's go ahead and jump in. Just before we do, we'll take a quick look at the chat here. Looks like it's a lot of highs and hellos and that sort of thing. Fantastic. Good to have all of our regulars here. Let's talk mechanics. All right, so we have this idea of a compulsion, right? That the idea is that we want to have this item, have the sentient ship's log, have the tools, um, the have the tools to kind of in some ways compel potentially a the character that possesses it to do its bidding. And there's a couple things we can reference in regard to that. One, sort of magic that exists that has some compulsion to it. We can use that as a base and kind of build from it. Let's see here. Oh, we already got some comments here. So Orth says, "What if the negatives from having a PC holding the contract scale over time?" I really like that idea, Orth. In fact, I was thinking along kind of the same lines. Um, so, yeah, let's to that end, what the idea that this kind of sparked in me as as I was kind of mulling this over in the past week is the Geas spell that exists in fifth edition, or I should say, as it exists in fifth edition. And effectively, this is a fifth level enchantment spell where the caster gives a verbal command to a creature and orders it to carry out some kind of service or refrain from an action or a course of activity as dictated by the spellcaster. And then the target then has to succeed a wisdom saving throw or have the charm condition for the duration. The duration of the spell is like 30 days if you cast it as fifth level. If you upcast it, it's longer. And then the target automatically succeeds if it can't understand your command. But while charmed, the creature takes 5d10 psychic damage if it acts in a manner directly counter to your command, and that damage can't be taken more than once a day. But you can issue any command that you choose, short of a suicidal command, and they can only be removed with a remove curse, greater restoration, or a wish spell to end the compulsion. And so that is one of those things that I really kind of like I kind of like as a basis for this. I don't know that we want to just say that it works as the Gia spell, although we certainly could. That's a relatively simple thing, especially if you're kind of doing this in a time crunch, is to kind of use that and just not tell the players that it was the Gia spell, but have that same sort of effect. But I think that since we've got the time, we can probably use that as a base and kind of build off of that. Looks like we got a few more comments here. Glad to hear you're feeling better, Fantasy Animal Vegan. Good to have you here. Let's see here. Ben Elder says, how about the affected PC is reluctant to let go of the contract? Maybe they can only use one-handed weapons, disadvantage on spell checks and concentration checks. Potentially, we could potentially do that for them. That's a pretty big. That's a pretty big hit. Depending on how we use that, right? If they can only use one hand, and can only use one-handed weapons, that as a martial class that could reduce, that reduces their fighting power pretty significantly. As a spellcasting class, if they've got disadvantage on spell attacks and concentration checks, that hits them pretty hard too, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just is a question of how kind of the flavor that we want of this, right? Ultimately, the character who's holding it is ideally going to want to give it up to the siren. The goal of this thing, of this sentient logbook, is to get back to its familiar, or it is the familiar to get back to its spellcaster, the siren in this case. And so I think it should definitely be a cursed item, meaning that the wielder of it can't give it up of their own volition, has to be taken from them. Yeah, and I think that that is a really cool feature in here, a really good idea, Ben, to make it that way, especially since remove curse would get rid of maybe an effect like this. Greater restoration might get an effect like this, and these are things that would end curses and end some of the compulsion to hold on to the item. So let's jot that down as an idea. Let's say um, logbook is cursed. Let's see here. Target cannot willingly give up logbook. Um, yeah, so we'll have to think about whether or not we want them to constantly have to be holding it, or whether that has to be on their person. Because that could create some interesting role play sort of stuff. Things like it's difficult to climb a ladder if they need to, or to climb anything. Frankly, if they've got it in one hand and they can't put it down. Additionally, if they go into a public place and somebody notices they can't put it down, it could be an interesting social interaction. And yeah, so something to think about. Okay, so let's see here. Fantasy Elvian, how would you roleplay someone having the log and seeing drowned sailors to get it the most immersion and prevent the PC not taking it seriously and prevent the other PCs from knowing it's going on? Um, there's a couple ways you could go about that. Personally, I wouldn't worry about letting the other players know that it's going on. Just because I think that sometimes it can be fun at a table to have the players know that there's something going on beyond the scenes, and their characters don't know there's something going beyond the scenes. It's kind of like when you're reading a book and you get to see some things from another character's perspective, and it reveals it foreshadows some of what's coming up. Um, but and you kind of get the thrill of being the reader and knowing that things are about to get more complicated, but your characters don't. That being said, um, the that being said, if you decide you want to keep it secret from everybody, that's I think that's where you're passing notes. That's where you are sending, messages, private messages on Discord, something along those lines. Um, you can always ask everybody else to kind of stand up and leave the room for a moment. Certainly seen DMs do that kind of thing. I think that causes more disruption in the game than it's worth. But that's a personal point of view on that. That's not like a hard and fast rule. In terms of keeping that secret. Now, in terms of the most immersion that comes along with that, that's just good description. The I mean, you just give them sort of that fleeting idea of what you want, and using your picking the words safely or I should say, picking your words carefully to get your point across. Are these fleeting visions? Are they lingering visions? Do they only see them periodically? Do they only appear in the shadows? Are they something that wakes up the characters, or the character, like the ghosts of Christmas past in the middle of the night? What's the interaction there? And so that's something that I think every GM who runs this, or every DM who runs this, is going to have to come up with on their own in terms of their description. We want to give them the base here, but we don't need to narrate out exactly how it happens for everybody who's going to run this. So that would be my take on that. Let's see here. Let's see here. Ben Elder says maybe if they hold it long enough, it starts to have one effect of the hollow spell. Oh, let's look that up. Let's check out hollow. Let's see what effects it has, or hallow spell, I think. Hallow. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of effects in the Hallow spell. You've got Hallowed Ward, you've got extra effects, or the extra effects. You've got things like Courage, Darkness, Daylight, Peaceful Rest, Dimension Interference, Fear, Resistance, Silence, Tongues, Vulnerability. Um, yeah, I mean, we could work something like that in there. I would be the question that I would have doing this is most of these are boons, right? Um, and so the idea being that um, that there's a lot of good things that would happen on the list if the characters hold on to it, which could be interesting, motivating them to hold on to it against some potential side effects of getting rid of it. Um, but they're also not necessarily thematic with what the this logbook wants, right? We got to come back to, again, this is a sentient thing. It has a desire. It has an objective, like everything else. Um, they so we kind of want to use that, I think, as our guiding light here. The logbook is using the tools at its disposal to get back to the siren. And so I think we should give it tools to use in that capacity, and not just things that we kind of slap the character with to make them go, oh, this was a mistake. Um, so that would be my reticence on using the Hallow spell on this, or is a guide here. And again, kind of why I would lean towards the Gia spell, if we're going to use that as a foundation. We're going to use a spell as a foundation. Let's see here. Mr. Rex says the command spell turns the holder into an alcoholic. Yeah, you could do something along those lines. I actually heard a horror story about a DM at one point who had a character fail one Constitution saving throw while they were drinking, and then decided that that character was forever an alcoholic, and the player was really upset about it. They were so mad. So yeah, you can do that kind of thing, but again, it's something you want to talk about with your group beforehand if you want to do that. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost, except they only drink seawater. That would be interesting. Mr. Rex gives the exhaustion condition. The exhaustion condition. That is that's a fun idea. I really like working with the exhaustion condition, because it's something that I think doesn't happen very often. I think it happens so rarely that the characters frequently just kind of get over it with a long rest. But it can be a truly kind of devastating thing if it starts to pile up. So the question then with that would become, um, the exhaustion condition kills you when you get to level 6 on the exhaustion scale, right? It's no save, no nothing, you're dead. Okay. So if we do something like every day that you hold the the logbook in your hand, it gives you exhaustion. That means they've got 5 days to get back, which gives them an interesting timeline. Alternatively, we could give them, say that they have to make a saving throw every day they hold it in there, and for every day they don't, they gain a level of exhaustion. Um, and we would also codify how this level of exhaustion can be removed. And so, will it be removed with a long rest? If it's removed with a long rest, then they should get it more than once a day because it never piles up on that. We might say that it can't be removed by anything other than a lesser restoration spell. In which case, okay, yeah, if you've got enough magic, you can burn through that and maintain it and hold on to it. But it's a continuing sink on your resources, which could be a very interesting conundrum to put our characters in. So let's say, as an idea, saving throw against exhaustion. Okay. Cool. That is an interesting thought, and fun to work with exhaustion. Ben Elder, in quotes, can I hold it between my teeth to free my hands? Rolls not one. You dislocate your jaw. Yeah, I mean, again, if we're going on to it where the character's got to hold on to it, physically hold on to it, somebody's going to ask if they can, put it in their teeth. Um, and there's and again, some of that's going to come down to the character. Some players would think that it's a really cool challenge to have to kind of overcome constantly. Other characters or other players rather would get frustrated with that pretty easily. So, I don't think there's anything necessarily bad about it. I just think that it's going to come down to who's playing at your table, um, one way or the other. Let's see here. Orth. He says if the goal is to have players return the logbook ASAP to the siren, you can always make it so that the negative gets stronger as the logbook attempts for the PCs to be forced to return the book. Absolutely. I think that it should. I think that it needs to be something that gets worse over time um, because I think that it puts that time pressure on there. Part of the reason I like something like the Gia spell or Mr. Mex's idea about exhaustion as a component of this because it is something that stacks. In fact, the exhaustion might be better for these second level adventures because we couldn't use the straight damage from the Gia spell on it because it's what I said 5d10 or something along those lines, which means for a second level character, you know, average damage that's going to kill them. So we would have to massage that damage regardless, and then we end up in the situation where okay, if it doesn't pound them out in the on the first day, they take a long rest, it all heals up again, unless we put a thing in there where they can't their hit point maximum reduces by that or yada yada yada, and that can become more complicated. So frankly, I'm kind of leaning towards the exhaustion idea, but we'll see what other ideas we have in here. Um, Let's see here. Ben Elder, regarding the hollow spell, says maybe the fear option or vulnerability, something negative for the players. Yeah, we could do something along those lines. The, and there's nothing that says we have to have only one effect on this, by the way, because, maybe the effect of having the ghosts in here is that now they have automatically have the fear of undead that kind of affects them while they're um, under the effects of the logbook here. So they have this compulsion to get back to the siren, but they also have this overwhelming fear of the undead as these ghosts haunt them nightly or even daily. So fear of the undead. That could work. That could absolutely work. Let's see here. Orth says hallucination is great. As time goes on, maybe starts getting penalties to check saves, then starts getting to attack rolls, crits don't happen, etc. Yeah, so that's where I would go with the exhaustion. I really like the 2024 exhaustion mechanics because they're just escalating reductions in your speed and reductions in your D20 tests. So anytime you roll a D20, makes it pretty easy to calculate, and it affects everything: your attacks, your skills, your saving throws. It is an effect across the board, and it starts small with a -2, and then it's a -4 by the second level, and then -6, and so you're looking at like a -10 by the fifth level, which is a huge wallop, I should say, and so that's a pretty heavy hit, and I think that scales kind of nicely, and it keeps us from having to uh, over overbuild the mechanic for this. Makes it easier to run in the heat of the moment. But I absolutely agree that the penalty should increase over time. Um, let's see here. Yeah. Ben Elders, I'm sorry, Mr. Mex says, would it be possible to establish a bond with it if you're carried it so long with successful checks, the spirit begins to be impressed with their resolve and has them make the checks less often? Um, yeah. That's an interesting thought when I think about that. Hmm. Can you bend it to your will? Can a PC bend the logbook to their will? I don't have an answer to that one right away, Mr. Max. That is a really interesting idea. Um, and I kind of want to say there should be a way to do that, because if we're making this a sentient item, there are plenty of other sentient items that have exchanged hands over the centuries within uh, you know, a multitude of D&D settings. Perhaps there is a method for that. That's a really cool idea. Hmm. We'll have to chew on that a little bit. If we do that, then there has to be some benefit to this logbook as well. It needs to have some power that the characters would want to hang on to. And it frankly can't be so powerful that it is game breaking at this point, because again, these are likely level 2 characters, right? Uh, these guys are not world saving, badasses yet. They're baby adventurers. They're little tiny baby adventurers. Um, the Yeah, so uh, it's so we'll have to think about that one. We really will have to think about that one. Um, because that being said, too, it might be something that they learn about the benefit of it and they decide to come back for it later in the adventure, try to steal it later on from the siren. That could be another thing. So um, let's say boons. And then we'll say heist later, question mark. Maybe it's target of a different adventure. Maybe it comes back again. We're putting a fair amount of thought into it. It would be a shame if it only appears once and only tangentially. If it's something that we don't want to appear terribly often, we shouldn't be putting this kind of detail into it. So it might be something important. Okay, so let's see. We got a few more comments here. Ben Elder mentions, "Ooh, a sudden fear of drowning or the sea could be an interesting problem to deal with." Ooh, that's that would be really interesting from the standpoint of they probably have to cross the sea to get back to the siren. And so uh, the question is then how, um, how does that affect the, how does that affect the PCs? How does that make it, it's going to make it harder to get back to the siren, but it could make it more interesting to get back to the siren. It could be a side effect of this. Um, something Huh. Something to chew on for sure, for sure. Let me think about that one. Let's cook that a little bit because that could be very interesting. Um, and then Orth says maybe the exhaustion stops at 5 since it's sentient. I think it would want to kill the PC since it would be risking never being able to return back to the siren. Um, Perhaps we could perhaps do that. Because you make a valid point there, Ortho, that if or Orth, since it wants to get back to the siren, the likelihood of it killing the PC kind of doesn't jive with that, unless of course they're not taking it back. If they're taking it farther away, they might. So maybe they only gain a level of exhaustion when they don't, each day they don't take moves to get it back to the siren. If they're working their way back there, it's getting what it wants. It doesn't give them exhaustion, for example. Um, maybe we steal that element from the Gia spell. Um, so it's a good point. Saving throw against exhaustion. Let's see here. When uh, the target does not take actions to return the logbook. Okay, that's a fun thought. I like that. I like that. Let's see. Jonathan Thought says, I just got an image of a tiny aquatic demon with a quill pen that stabs the contractee and signs their name in their blood, and then bamps out in a puff of sea spray. I mean, again, depends on the campaign you're running. You absolutely could use something like that. Okay, so looking at this here, I really like the saving throw against exhaustion thing. Um, I like the fear effect. Um, think I think since the book wants to go back to the siren, making the creature afraid of making the target afraid of, drowning the sea, something that since it's going to have to cross water to get there, is probably counter to its desires. But I like the fear of the undead being haunted by ghosts because that's something too that we could toss up sort of on the road back to make that play and be in effect. Something that's outside of the siren's control potentially. Um, so I'm gonna highlight these real quick just so that we get these marked. Okay. And I like the idea of the saving throw against exhaustion, specifically when the target doesn't make moves to get the logbook back to the siren. Um, that that I think is a really cool feature, and we can say that those levels of exhaustion can't be removed except by lesser restoration, greater restoration, something along those lines, or maybe they can't be removed at all, or maybe they get removed and when the character makes a move back towards the siren, we can come up with a mechanic for that and use that exhaustion to kind of scale things and maybe give the players some reasons, some ways that they can overcome that or not overcome that. And the question then is, can the logbook ever be made to serve the PCs? Um, the hmm, I feel like as an evil entity, it probably can't be made to bond with the PCs, but it can probably be forced to. So there's probably a method for that, and if there is, then there needs to be some benefit to having this logbook if under your control. Frankly, there would be some benefit that that the siren would use out of it. Maybe having it under your control means that you can make these binding contracts with other entities. And you can do so maybe once a day, maybe once a 10 days, something along those lines. Um, so let's say once per day, once per week, or so on. I like that concept. Um, the question is going to be, how do they bend this logbook to their will? How do they get it disconnected from the siren? Can they do that while the siren is alive? Um, that's a thought. And maybe not one we answered just yet. Maybe it's something that get answered later, but something to think about. Mr. Mike says, so after so many checks, the spirit possesses the holder, and all D20 rolls are done with disadvantage because the ghost is working against the player in an attempt to complete the quest or be rid of it. So, again, along those lines, we run into a place where we're over engineering this. It becomes complicated to run as a DM because, again, you got a lot of stuff going on as a DM. You're not just focusing on this one mechanic. And so you want to build this stuff up in a way that it's relatively easy for you to keep track of. To that end, one thing that I try to avoid overall is that when you have got a lot of things going on, I try not to end up in a situation where I have to keep track of how many times a character has made a specific, specific D20 test on something, because I will invariably miss one of those, and it will skew things. Instead, I either try to make there be an immediate effect to a success or failure, or I make those. Well, actually, I won't even say or. I pretty much stick to there should be an immediate effect to that success or failure, and because it's just easier to track. Um, there's a next Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, something I want to do, and I promise this is relevant to what we're talking about here. But next Wednesday, something I want to do is I recently ran a custom one shot for our very own Jonathan Frost, Mr. Max, and Orth, and I kind of wanted to talk about um, some of the differences there, so and some of the pros and cons, some things I would change, some things that I liked, that kind of deal, to kind of compare and contrast to what we're doing here. Because on this channel and what we're building here, we talk a lot about how putting a high level of polish on these adventures because we've got all this time. Well, when you're writing an adventure under a time crunch, that changes things a little bit. You only have so long to think about it, so long to put information in, and it's really you're writing it for yourself, and so you'll put less in than you might put in for other people and what have you. And then there's always going to be things that you didn't think about till the moment you run it, and how do you fly with that? How do you adapt for that? That kind of thing. And so, if that's interesting to everybody, I really kind of wanted to talk about that on Wednesday, specifically because I over engineered one of the mechanics in there. And I want to talk about what that mechanic was and talk about why it became such a bastard to run in the middle of uh, in the middle of running this one shot. And so, what adaptations I had to make on the fly to keep it from bogging everything down. Um, so, if that's something interesting to you guys, then I will then we'll do that on Wednesday. If not, we'll continue on with this. You guys just let me know. All right. So yeah, to that point, we don't want to over engineer anything, Mr. Max. We want to make sure we're keeping it as streamlined as possible, so it helps things smoother and easier as we run them. Ben Elder says might be a bit simple, but maybe drawing out and defeating the spirit of the book could render it non-threatening. I don't think that's too simple. Um, especially. Um, especially if there's some ritual involved in that. And that adds a very interesting element to this world if we do something along those lines. The concept of ritual magic. And I don't necessarily mean like ritual in the sense that we talk about in D&D where you can ritually cast a spell and it takes 10 minutes and you don't use a spell slot and yada, yada, yada. Right? Or it takes 10 minutes plus the casting time and it doesn't use a spell slot, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, magic that requires the PCs to enact specific actions and collect specific items to make this to make that work, to enact an effect, thinking more along the lines of how, a hag might conduct rituals, where you kind of have the coven, the triumvirate of them, and there's and it's not just one person weaving a spell; it's multiple people working together to make this happen, and that's kind of a really interesting idea. That maybe this is a super powerful kind of artifact level sentient item that the characters can acquire early on, but they can't use it until they enact this ritual, draw the spirit out of it, that binds it to the siren, and sever that connection. And so that becomes kind of an interesting little side quest as they work their way through the world, while they still have to deal with all the negative effects that come from having this book in their possession and making them sort of question, can we get rid of it and stash it somewhere? And if we do, will somebody find it and steal it? And so on and so forth. So I really, really like that idea, actually. So let's see here. A ritual to draw out the spirit of the logbook and sever the connection to the siren. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Sever, not severe, sever. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see here. Ben Elder says, I'm picturing a hulk of rotting captains bound together, maybe with a ship's figurehead for its head. Yeah, yeah, we could certainly do something kind of cool like that for the let's see here. Colossal, undead, spirit, Hulk of bound, drowned ships captains. I like that idea. It's very flavorful, and we can figure out what the stat block is for it later. Cool idea, Ben. Very cool idea. Jonathan Ross says, very pleased to be your playtester. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. It was really good to have you guys there. I had a lot of fun playing with you all. So it looks like Ben Aldous is interesting in regard to talking about that adventure. Mr. Mix is looking forward to more guinea pigging for you. Would definitely like to have you to cover that. Excellent. Glad you guys enjoyed it. It was really fun having you guys test some material for me. It was a good time. Then coming back to the question of the ritual, Ben Elder says maybe they being the PCs need to take it to an altar. Maybe there is an altar somewhere to know God, but simply a place of remembrance to those who are lost, body and soul to the waves. Yeah, so some sort of magically significant site. If you're building a ritual, all right, I like to when I'm building out a ritual like this, it's something that needs to happen. I like to include a couple things. One, it needs to happen at a special place. So let's note that idea down for Ben here. So or Ben's idea down here. So let's say here, place of magical significance. And we could say unbound altar. We could say a seamount. We could say a cliff face, all kinds of stuff. Whatever we want to do for that. I think back on some. Sometimes for places like this, I kind of draw ideas from. I'll listen to creepy podcasts that are about horror stories and strange occurrences and that kind of thing, or they're all in places I've been in the world. And for example, there's I want to say it's in Washington State. There is a place in the woods where you can find a stone table with stone chairs surrounding it, and each one it actually holds the cremated remains of this family group, and it's just kind of a bone chilling kind of thing to run into in the woods. On the opposite side of that, I used to live in West Africa, and there's a place called the Dam de Mali, and it is a cliff that literally looks like the silhouette of a woman. I don't mean like it is suggested of it. I mean it looks straight up like that. And so maybe there's something along those lines. That we have a cliff face, or we have an altar like the stone table and chairs in the woods. Maybe we've got a seamount, so a place where there's been a ton of shipwrecks or something along those lines out in the water. But we come up with a place of significance like that, and then we need collect 3 special resources. I always do 3 special resources, 3 special things the characters have to collect to enact a powerful ritual, because 3 is just frankly, a satisfying number to humans and in storytelling. And so coming up with 3 resources is enough. It's not too little. It's not too many. If you throw in too many items in there, it feels like they're never gonna come to the end. And then I have a action that must be completed by 3 to 5 PCs/NPCs. And I do 3 to 5 for the complement of people who have to do it. Again, because three is a nice number. If you want to get into uh, some of the kind of well, I won't say real world magic, but if you follow things like Wicca and modern witchcraft and that kind of thing, the idea of the pentagram, the 5 points are to represent the four elements and then the spirit. And so that is something that's easily tieable into a world like this. It's something that's easily kind of convertible, and people, because we're so used to associating things, imagery like pentagrams with magic and what have you, your players tend to kind of pick up on that pretty quickly. It seems pretty natural for them. And so having somebody at all 5 points of the star or something along those lines is usually, while, I'll either do three or five. Four could work too, and the other number could work. You could do seven, lucky number, whatever have you, and have the party recruit NPCs outside of this to help them with that. Entirely up to you. But we'd come up with something along those lines, I would think. Or at least I would if I was doing this. Let's see here. Ben Elder says maybe three ships' bells from wrecked ships. Could do that. I would try personally. Let's see here. Ship's bell. I would make. I would make it three different items that need to be collected. I like the idea of a ship's bell, though. That should definitely be one of them. But I would make it three different items, so that we don't end up on side quests that feel repetitive. That we're getting different things, each time. Um, so ship's bell should definitely be one of them. Um, we could think of some other kind of stuff here. Um, we could pull on stuff that's drawn from ships, or we could pull on stuff that's drawn from the sea. We could do a combination thereof. We could, frankly, make one of them like the skull of the ship's captain or something along those lines. Um, the we could play around with that. We could come up with some stuff. So let's hear what other ideas have come up in the chat here. It says maybe two can be retrieved from a wreck close to the shore, but one is more needed from a sunken wreck needing some good swim checks. Yeah. Um, yeah, I like the idea of it's a specific ship that we need it from, and it is a little bit of a distance. We make it kind of a mini dungeon, as it were, and rely on some of that swim checks and breath holding and playing with some of the things that are mechanics that are established, but we don't as DMs get to use very often. That could be fun. I like that idea. Uh, let's see here. Mr. Bix is possibly needing a living relative of one of the spirits bound to the contract as a way to connect to the item. That's possible. That's possible. One being a living relative. Yeah, so instead of making that one of the resources that has to be collected, we make that one of the people that has to be gathered. That's a really good idea. That's a really good idea. Or it says ship's bell, drowned captain's hat, maybe an old quill. I really like the drowned captain's hat. Then we've got Ben Older says blessed lamp oil, captain's cutlass, wood from a ship figurehead or name plaque. Yeah, I think we need something from a captain specifically. And I think a captain's hat is a little more symbolic. So let's say, and the fact that let's say a drowned captain's hat. I like that as a good one. I like the idea of an old quill. I like the idea of ink in there. I like the idea of a blessed lamp oil potentially. Wood from a figurehead or a ship's plaque could be interesting as well. One thing that pops in my mind when I think about this kind of stuff, or is think about this specifically, is that, thematically we've got something that connects, we've got something that represents a ship in here, right? We've got the ship's bell. We've got something that represents a person in the form of this drowned captain's hat. Maybe we need something to represent the sea as kind of the trifecta of this, of all the three parts that would go into um, the souls of these drowned captains in this book, or these drowned sailors. So maybe we take something like, instead of doing an old quill, it is, we need squid ink, or we need ink from a kraken, or we need ink from an aboleth, or we need something that is not just something that has that a little bit of a connection back towards the logbook, but also has a strong connection to the sea itself. Um, so maybe instead of, like, Kraken or Aboleth, we say we need giant squid ink or something along those lines for this. Um, and we could say even, to represent the ship, to present the sailor, to present the sea. Give us a little more, something to work with narratively. Ben Elder says, how about a special red pearl from a giant undead clam? I mean, yeah, you could do something along those lines too. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It connects to the book. I mean, well, it connects to the sea. Um, so that's certainly something that you could swap instead of, giant squid ink or something along those lines. Absolutely, you could do something like that. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says, "I know where the characters can get aboleths." Not. I mean, we do have an aboleth-led um, faction in this world, so that might be one of the side quests. We could make that the thing. I mean, we've already have some established aboleth presence in this world, so I mean, why not? We could play around with that. But anyway, so these are some good ideas here. I think. Well, I guess next time we're going to be kind of showing and talking about, the one shot that I wrote, and comparing it to the methodology used here and that kind of deal. But I think maybe on Friday then we sit down and we finalize the mechanic here, because I think we've got a bunch of cool ideas, and at some point we just need to pick some stuff so that we can move on. And so let's finalize that on Friday, and make a goal to then round out the actual aesthetic of the Siren's Nest, so that we can finally put a pin in the Sea Shanty Siren adventure. Cool. If that sounds good to everybody, then I think that's what we're gonna do. So, with that, let's go ahead and put a pin in it for the evening. Thank you guys so much for all of your ideas. You came up with some incredible stuff in the chat today. Love the creativity. We've gone from this being kind of an incidental story element to it being a living, breathing item in this world that adds a lot of texture and color to this campaign. And frankly, it introduces not just a really cool magic item, but the idea of that the characters can enact rituals, which is something that we wanted to layer in later in terms of use of the artifact, but means we can also maybe spread out some other kind of rituals throughout the world. The characters can seek out the components for, enact, and then perhaps gain boons from, or use as leverage in other adventures, and what have you. So a fun little mechanic that we can probably build out too, and yeah, just add another layer to this world. Cool stuff. So again, thank you all so much for joining me today. If you have enjoyed this stream, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff helps the channel grow, helps us keep this chat dynamic, and helps keep new, fresh ideas coming in, which is the bread and butter of this channel. As always, if you enjoy my writing, you want to jump into one of my games, come check me out at startplaying.games/gm/RJ Kerr, or click the link in the video. I've gonna have some new adventures getting posted here. We're looking at doing some Ghost of Saltmarsh, looking at doing some Curse of Strahd, looking at getting some homebrew campaigns up there, and I'll definitely have this one shot that we're going to talk about on Wednesday posted by Wednesday. So if you're interested in hopping in it and playing it for yourself, you absolutely can. All right. Thanks again. Before we go, few last comments in the chat here. Let's see here. Let's see. Mr. Mex says, would you be open to booking video ideas? A one-off like the one on Wednesday? Yeah, absolutely. If there's some topics we want to talk about and we can work them in and make them the Wednesday topic, something like that, sure, 100%. Happy to do it. Always get out a little variety to this. And then we got a couple, thank you, John Frost, for being here. And thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed the stream. Same for you. Same with you, Ben. I'm glad you had a good time. Orth, always good to have you here. Mr. X, always, again, always fun to have you guys in the chat here. My regulars. Good playing with you. I will see you guys all this Wednesday. Talk to you then. Bye now.